I once believed family meant unconditional love. That illusion shattered when I asked my son for temporary shelter after explaining my investments needed time to recover. Instead of compassion, he stood up at our family reunion and announced to everyone, "No rent, no stay." The words cut through me like a knife as relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some even smirking. This was the same son I raised alone after his father left. I worked 3 jobs to put him through college. I nursed him through pneumonia for weeks when doctors worried he might not make it. I sacrificed dadding, my career advancement, even my health, all so he could have opportunities I never had. Now, with one cruel declaration, he reduced me to a burden, a financial liability to be discarded. As I drove away from his luxury home that night, tears streaming down my face, I made a decision. What my son failed to realize was that I wasn't actually broke. In fact, I had been quietly waiting for the right investment after selling my business. His landlord had approached me months ago about buying the property. Tomorrow, I would make the call. I stood outside my son's house clutching a bottle of wine that cost more than I should have spent given my supposed financial situation. But I wanted to bring something nice for the family reunion. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door of the sprawling suburban home that my son Michael had purchased last year. A house that I had contributed to the down payment for, though he rarely mentioned that fact. The door swung open, and there stood my daughter-in-law Vanessa, her perfect smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Oh, Margaret, you made it," she said, glancing at my simple outfit and the mid-range wine. I could already feel her judgment. "Everyone's out back." I followed her through their immaculate house with its gleaming hardwood floors and designer furniture. Photos of Michael, Vanessa, and my 2 grandchildren line the walls, professional family portraits where everyone wore coordinating outfits. Not a single picture of me among them. As we stepped onto the back patio, memories flooded back. Michael at 5, crying because he'd skinned his knee, and how I'd held him close despite being exhausted from working a double shift. Michael at 12, when I'd stayed up all night helping him finish his science project after my own workday. Michael at 18, when I'd emptied my savings account to help him afford his dream college. Now Michael stood tall and confident by the grill, wearing an expensive watch and designer polo shirt. He nodded at me from across the yard, not bothering to come greet me. My heart sank a little, but I pushed the feeling aside. He was busy hosting, I told myself. That's all it was. "Grandma's here." My granddaughter Emma came running, wrapping her arms around my waist. This was why I endured the subtle slights, the growing distance. For moments like these, "There's my favorite girl," I said, hugging her tightly before pulling out the small gift I'd brought her. "Just a little something I saw and thought of you." The afternoon progressed as these family gatherings usually did. Michael's in-laws dominated the conversation with tales of their latest vacation. Michael's colleagues from his investment firm discussed property values and stock options. I sat quietly, smiling when appropriate, offering to help in the kitchen when I could. "So, Mom, how's retirement treating you?" Michael asked during a lull in conversation, drawing everyone's attention to me. It wasn't a genuine question. It was performative, his way of showing others he was a good son who cared. "It's been an adjustment," I answered carefully. "Actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about." I hadn't planned to bring this up in front of everyone, but maybe having witnesses would make it harder for him to dismiss me outright. The last 3 times I'd tried to have this conversation privately, he'd made excuses to end our calls or postponed our coffee dates. "The market downturn has hit my retirement investments pretty hard," I continued, feeling my cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm looking at some temporary solutions until things recover." Michael's smile tightened. "That's rough, Mom. Maybe you should talk to a financial advisor." "I have," I said, gripping my water glass tightly. "But I need to reduce my expenses for a few months. I was wondering if I could stay with you and Vanessa for a short while, just until my portfolio recovers." The silence that followed was excruciating. I could feel every eye on me. Vanessa's expression had frozen into something resembling horror, as if I'd suggested releasing rats into her pristine home. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, we don't have the space. The guest room is my home office now." I could take the sofa, I said, adding the pleading note in my voice. Or even help with the kids in exchange for staying in Emma's room. She could bunk with Taylor for a bit. Margaret, Vanessa cut in. The children need their own spaces. It's important for their development. I nodded, realizing I'd miscalculated badly. I should never have asked in front of everyone. But before I could retreat gracefully, Michael stood up. Let's be honest here, he said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used at work. We have a rule in this house. No rent, no stay. The words hung in the air like a slap. I stared at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes who had once been the baby I rocked to sleep through colicky nights, the boy I'd comforted through his first heartbreak, the young man whose college graduation had been the proudest day of my life. You're not entitled to live here just because you're family, he continued, seemingly emboldened by Vanessa's approving nod. Everyone needs to pull their weight. That's what I learned from watching you work all those years, isn't it? Nothing is free. I felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of his smirking colleagues and Vanessa's smugly sympathetic parents. I understand, I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. It was just a thought. Michael's father-in-law chuckled. Smart man, Michael. Family is family, but business is business. The conversation moved on as if my humiliation had been nothing more than a minor interruption. I excused myself to use the bathroom, locking the door behind me before allowing a single tear to escape. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had given everything to a son who now saw her as nothing more than a potential financial burden. After composing myself, I returned to the gathering and made it through another hour of strained small talk before claiming a headache. I hugged my grandchildren tightly, knowing it might be some time before I saw them again. Feel better, Margaret, Vanessa said as I left, the relief evident in her voice. Driving away from my son's house, the tears finally came freely. I checked into a modest hotel, not wanting to make the long drive home in my emotional state. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I stared at my phone, half expecting it to ring with an apologetic call from Michael. It remained silent. I thought about the truth I'd hidden from everyone, including my son. The market downturn affecting my investments was a test, a way to see if the values I'd tried to instill in him had taken root. The answer was now painfully clear. What Michael didn't know was that 6 months ago, I had sold my consulting business for a sum that would make his annual bonus look like pocket change. His landlord had approached me shortly after, looking for investors interested in buying the entire block of luxury homes, including Michael's rental. I had declined at the time, not wanting to interfere in my son's life. Now, as I sat alone in a hotel room, publicly humiliated by my own child, I made a decision. Tomorrow morning, I would make a call. It was time Michael learned that his mother wasn't quite as powerless as he thought. I woke early the next morning, my eyes puffy from crying but my resolve stronger than ever. Sunlight filtered through the hotel curtains as I reached for my phone. No missed calls from Michael. No texts apologizing for his behavior. Not that I had truly expected any. I ordered room service and sat by the window, watching people hurry about their morning routines. Families with children, couples holding hands, lone businesspeople clutching coffee cups. Everyone connected to someone, everyone with somewhere to belong. Except me, apparently. The truth was I wasn't destitute or even close to it. 6 months ago, I had sold the consulting business I'd built from nothing over 20 years. The business I'd started at my kitchen table while Michael was doing homework. The one I'd grown while still attending every one of his soccer games and school plays. Riverstone Consulting had begun as just me, offering bookkeeping services to local small businesses. By the time I sold it, we had offices in 3 states and specialized in helping women-owned businesses secure funding and scale operations. The acquisition offer had been substantial, more money than I had ever imagined possessing. I hadn't told Michael about the sale, not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I wanted to observe how he treated me when he thought I had nothing to offer him. The investment troubles I'd mentioned were fictional, a test to see if the values I'd tried to instill in him Compassion, family loyalty, gratitude had taken root. They clearly hadn't. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Alina, my best friend since college and the former COO of my company. Well, she asked without preamble. How did it go with Michael? I sighed. About as well as a root canal without anesthesia. Oh, Maggie, I'm so sorry. He told me no rent, no stay in front of everyone at the family gathering, like I was some stranger asking for a handout, not his mother. Alina's stream of colorful expletives made me smile despite everything. That ungrateful little after everything you've done for him, you worked 60-hour weeks to put him through that fancy university. You refinanced your house to help with his down payment. I know, Ellie, I was there. So what now? Are you still going through with the plan to purchase that retirement villa in Arizona? I paused, thinking about the peaceful retirement community I'd been considering. It seemed so empty now, so lonely. What was the point of having all this money if I had no one to share it with, no purpose to drive me? Actually, I've been thinking about a different investment opportunity. Back in March, just after the company sale had finalized, I'd received a call from a man named Robert Klein, a real estate developer who owned the block of luxury homes where Michael rented. He was looking to sell the entire development to a single investor and had heard through mutual connections that I might be interested. I had politely declined at the time, not wanting to become entangled in my son's housing situation. Ellie, do you still have Robert Klein's contact information? The developer who reached out about that housing block. I'm sure I do somewhere. Why, don't tell me you're actually considering it after the way Michael treated you. I'm more than considering it. After finishing my call with Alina, I dialed Robert Klein's number. He sounded pleased to hear from me. Mrs. Wilson, what a pleasant surprise. I'd heard you'd sold Riverstone. Congratulations. Thank you, Robert. I'm calling about that property investment you mentioned a few months ago. Is it still available? The Oakwood Heights development? It certainly is. I've had some interest, but nothing concrete yet. I'd like to make an offer for the entire block. Wonderful. I can email over the portfolio with all the details. May I ask what prompted your change of heart? Last time we spoke, you seemed hesitant about becoming your son's landlord. Let's just say circumstances have changed. While waiting for Robert's email, I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Michael. Instead, there was a voicemail from Vanessa reminding me that Emma's birthday party was next month, along with a pointed comment about gift registries, and no need to bring anything secondhand this time. As if the handmade quilt I'd given Emma last Christmas was somehow inferior to the plastic toys that broke within weeks. My laptop pinged with Robert's email. I spent the next hour reviewing property values, rental incomes, and maintenance costs for the 12 homes in Oakwood Heights. The numbers were excellent. Even if I hadn't had personal reasons for wanting this particular investment, it would have been a sound financial decision. I called Robert back. I'd like to make an all-cash offer contingent on an expedited closing. How quickly can we make this happen? Robert sounded taken aback. All cash? Well, that certainly speeds things up. We could probably close in 2 weeks, maybe less if the title search goes smoothly. Perfect. And Robert, I'd appreciate your discretion on this matter. I'd prefer the current tenants not know about the change in ownership until everything is finalized. Of course, Mrs. Wilson, standard procedure. After hanging up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was appalled at myself for what might seem like revenge. The other part, however, felt an unexpected surge of empowerment. For too long, I had been the giver, the supporter, the one who sacrificed. Perhaps it was time for Michael to understand that relationships, even between mothers and sons, should be reciprocal. My phone rang again. Michael's name appeared on the screen. My heart jumped despite everything. Maybe he was calling to apologize. Hello? I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mom, about yesterday, he began, and for a moment hope flickered. I just wanted to make sure you understood our position. Vanessa and I have worked hard for what we have, and we're trying to teach the kids about boundaries and responsibility. The hope died as quickly as it had come. I understand perfectly, Michael. Good, because Vanessa was worried you might have taken it the wrong way. We do care about you, we just can't have you living with us. Even temporarily, even your own mother. He sighed, the exasperated sound I'd heard countless times since his teenage years. Mom, it's not personal, it's just. We have a certain lifestyle, and frankly, at your age, you should have planned better for retirement. I almost laughed at the irony. Instead, I simply said, "You're right, Michael, I should have planned better." Exactly. Anyway, Vanessa and I were thinking maybe we could all have dinner next week, our treat. The olive branch extended, duty fulfilled. That sounds lovely. I'll check my calendar and get back to you. After hanging up, I opened my laptop again and reviewed the offer I was preparing to send for the Oakwood Heights development. My finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before I clicked. The wheels were now in motion. Michael had no idea that his mother, the woman he dismissed as financially irresponsible, was about to become his landlord. The thought brought me no joy, only a sad determination. This wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching a long overdue lesson about respect, gratitude, and the true meaning of family. I hadn't expected things to move so quickly, but Robert Klein proved remarkably efficient. Within 3 days, the title company had completed their preliminary search, and the inspection reports came back clean. All that remained was the final paperwork and transfer of funds. In less than a week, I would own the entire Oakwood Heights development, including the house my son believed was so securely his. "You're sure about this?" Eleanor asked over coffee at her condo. "It's not too late to back out." I stirred my latte thoughtfully. I've never been more certain of anything. This isn't just about Michael's behavior at the reunion. It's about years of growing entitlement and ingratitude. Well, I'm behind you 100%. Someone needs to teach that boy a lesson. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Dinner reservation at Humiliated tomorrow at 7. Just us, no Vanessa or kids." I showed Eleanor the message. She raised an eyebrow. "The makeup dinner right on schedule." "He always follows the same pattern," I said. "Behave poorly, wait a few days, then offer an expensive meal as though that erases everything." Eleanor snorted. "And you've always accepted his non-apologies." "Not this time," I said, typing a confirmation to Michael. "This time I'll be bringing something extra to dinner." The next evening, I dressed carefully in a sleek black pantsuit I'd purchased after selling my company. It was more expensive than anything I'd worn when Michael was growing up, when every spare dollar went toward his education and activities. I applied makeup with precision and fastened simple pearl earrings, a gift from my own mother, before tucking an envelope into my handbag. The envelope contained the property documents for Oakwood Heights, now bearing my name as owner. Humiliated was exactly the type of restaurant Michael preferred: upscale, trendy, and overpriced. The kind of place where the portions were tiny and the waitstaff recited the chef's philosophy before presenting the menu. Michael was already seated when I arrived, typing on his phone. He stood to greet me, his eyes widening slightly at my appearance. "Mom, you look different," he said, kissing my cheek. "New outfit." "New perspective," I replied, taking my seat. The waiter appeared immediately to take our drink orders. Michael ordered an expensive bottle of wine without consulting me. "My treat tonight," he said with a generous smile. "How kind," I murmured, thinking about the $4.7 million I'd just spent on his housing development. Once our drinks arrived, Michael leaned forward with what I recognized as his business negotiation posture. "Mom, about the other day. I think there was a misunderstanding." "Was there?" "Yes, Vanessa and I weren't saying we don't want to help you. We were just surprised by the timing and the public nature of your request." I sipped my wine. "So if I had asked privately, you would have welcomed me into your home?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, not exactly. The thing is, we value our privacy and space, but we could have discussed other options for helping you. Such as, maybe finding you a nice senior apartment. Or helping you apply for assistance programs." I nearly choked on my wine. "Assistance programs, Michael, I'm 63 and temporarily cash flow limited, not destitute." Of course, he backpedaled. "I just meant we could explore options that wouldn't disrupt our household." The waiter returned to take our orders. Michael selected the most expensive steak on the menu while recommending I try the chicken. "The portions here are quite generous," he said meaningfully. I ordered the lobster. Throughout dinner, Michael alternated between offering condescending financial advice and subtly suggesting I find work to keep busy despite my supposed retirement. He mentioned a friend's mother who was working at a local craft store. She really enjoys the employee discount, he said, as if this would be a selling point. How interesting, I replied. And here I thought my MBA and 30 years of business experience might qualify me for something more substantial. Michael laughed as though I'd made a joke. Mom, be realistic. At your age, with your resume gap since leaving that bookkeeping service, I own Riverstone Consulting, I corrected him. I didn't leave a bookkeeping service. He waved his hand dismissively. Whatever it was, it's been years. The job market doesn't exactly favor older applicants without current skills. I bit my tongue, remembering the seven-figure acquisition offer I'd accepted. The non-disclosure agreement had prevented me from publicly announcing the sale, but I could have told my own son privately. I had chosen not to, and moments like this reinforced that decision. After dinner, as we waited for the check, Michael's tone turned conciliatory. Listen, Mom, I know things are tough right now, but you've always been resilient. Remember how you always told me that challenges build character? I remember, I said quietly. And look at me now. All those years of hard work paid off. I'm sure you'll figure things out too, and if you need a small loan to tide you over, I could probably help. Within reason, of course. The check arrived, and Michael made a show of placing his platinum card on top without even glancing at the total. After the waiter left, he turned back to me with a self-satisfied smile. So, we're good now, right? You understand our position about the living arrangement. I studied my son's face. The confident set of his jaw, the expensive haircut, the designer glasses. When had he become this person who measured everything and everyone by their financial value? I understand completely, I said, reaching into my purse. My fingers brushed against the envelope containing the property documents, but I hesitated. Not yet. There was one more thing I needed to confirm. I had received a disturbing call from Alina earlier that day. She'd run into Vanessa's mother at the country club, who had mentioned offhandedly that Michael was planning to sell some old family junk he'd been storing. Items that, according to her, some antique dealer was very interested in. Those items were irreplaceable family heirlooms I had entrusted to Michael when I downsized 5 years ago. My grandmother's silver service. My grandfather's pocket watch collection. Photo albums dating back 4 generations. Items that were meant to be preserved for Emma and Taylor, not converted to cash for Michael's benefit. By the way, I said casually, I've been thinking about those family heirlooms I stored with you. I'd like to create a proper inventory, maybe take some photos for insurance purposes. Michael's expression flickered momentarily before settling back into casualness. Oh, that old stuff, it's taking up a lot of space in our storage room. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about it. I think it might be better if you found somewhere else to keep it, or maybe we should consider selling some of it. I know a dealer who specializes in estate items. My chest tightened. Those pieces have been in our family for generations, Michael. They're not for sale. He leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. Be practical, Mom. You're in a financial bind, living in a small apartment. Where would you even put all that stuff? Besides, some of it is quite valuable. It could help with your situation. Those items are meant to be passed down to Emma and Taylor someday. Michael shrugged. Kids these days don't want old things. They prefer experiences, technology. Those antiques are just sitting there collecting dust. In your storage room, I reminded him. In my things that I asked you to keep safe for me. Those old things, he said dismissively. They're in my house now, Mom, and there it was, the final confirmation I needed. As the waiter returned with Michael's credit card, I made my decision. The envelope would stay in my purse for now, but not for much longer. It was time to reclaim what was mine, both the heirlooms and my dignity. I left the restaurant in a fog of anger and disbelief. Michael's words echoed in my head as I drove. Those old things, they're in my house now, Mom. As if possession alone granted him the right to sell off our family's history, items I had merely asked him to store temporarily. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I found myself driving to Oakwood Heights, slowly cruising past the row of elegant houses until I reached Michael's. Lights blazed from every window, the large TV visible through the front bay window where Vanessa was watching something with a glass of wine. My grandchildren were likely upstairs, already tucked into their beds in rooms filled with more toys than they could ever play with. I parked across the street and just sat there, staring at the house that had never felt like a home to me. A house I now owned, along with every other residence on the block. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son, who believed I couldn't afford rent, was now essentially my tenant, and he had no idea my phone rang. Eleanor, did you tell him? She asked immediately. Not yet, I replied, still watching the house. I couldn't do it. Why not? After what he said about your heirlooms, Maggie, he's planning to sell your family treasures. I know. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. That's exactly why I'm hesitating. What if this makes things worse? What if I lose my grandchildren over this? Eleanor's voice softened. Honey, when was the last time he actually let you spend quality time with Emma and Taylor, without Vanessa hovering or Michael checking his watch every 5 minutes? She was right. My visits with the children had become increasingly supervised and abbreviated over the years. Christmas was a rushed hour between their other activities. Birthdays involved formal parties where I was just one of many guests. Even when I offered to babysit, there was always some reason why it wasn't convenient. I just keep asking myself what kind of mother raises a son who would treat her this way, I whispered. Stop that right now, Eleanor said firmly. You were an exceptional mother. You worked yourself to the bone for that boy. You showed him kindness, responsibility, and respect. If he chose not to learn those lessons, that's on him, not you. I watched as Vanessa moved past the window, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing animatedly, probably complaining about me to one of her friends. What would Harold say if he could see Michael now? Eleanor asked gently. The mention of my late husband sent a pang through my heart. Harold had died when Michael was just 10, killed in a car accident on his way home from work. He'd never got to see Michael grow up, graduate, get married. He'd missed so much. But Harold had been principled to his core, a man who valued honesty and integrity above all. He would be heartbroken, I admitted. But he would also say that enabling bad behavior only ensures it continues. Exactly. Now are you going to let Michael sell off your family history? Are you going to let him think it's acceptable to treat his mother this way? I straightened in my seat, resolve hardening. No, I'm not. After ending the call with Eleanor, I drove home to my modest but comfortable condo. The downsize 5 years ago had been practical at the time. The old house had felt too empty after Michael moved out, and I'd wanted to be closer to my business. It wasn't the small apartment Michael had condescendingly referenced, but it was certainly less grand than his rented mansion. I made myself a cup of tea and settled at my desk, pulling out 2 sheets of stationery. On the first, I wrote a formal eviction notice, citing change of ownership and giving the standard 30 days required by law. I signed it with my full legal name, adding property owner beneath. The second letter was harder to write. I started and stopped multiple times, torn between maternal love and righteous anger. Eventually, I simply wrote from the heart, Dear Michael, by now you've read the eviction notice and know that I've purchased Oakwood Heights, including the house you've been renting. This will naturally come as a shock. What might shock you more is learning that I never actually needed a place to stay. My request was a test. When you failed spectacularly with your no rent, no stay declaration in front of our entire family. The truth is, I sold Riverstone Consulting 6 months ago for a sum that would make your annual bonus look like pocket change. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see how you would treat me when you thought I had nothing to offer you financially. Your response told me everything I needed to know about the man you've become. I think about the little boy who once brought me dandelions and told me I was the best mom in the world. The teenager who promised to buy me a big house someday to thank me for all my sacrifices. Where did that boy go, Michael? At what point did you start seeing me as a burden rather than the woman who worked 3 jobs to put food on your table? Who went without new clothes for years so you could have the latest sneakers? Who nursed you through pneumonia for weeks when doctors worried you might not make it? Your plan to sell our family heirlooms without my permission was the final straw. Those items are not yours to sell. They are our family's legacy, meant to connect Emma and Taylor to their roots. I've arranged to collect those items tomorrow. Please have them packed and ready. As for your living situation, you have two choices. 1. You can vacate the property within 30 days as the notice requires. 2. Or we can discuss new terms that include more than just financial consideration. Terms that recognize the value of family, respect, and shared history. The choice is yours. Either way, this moment marks a change in our relationship. With love despite everything, Mom. I sealed both letters in envelopes and set them on my nightstand. Tomorrow would be difficult, but necessary. As I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about Harold again, wondering what he would make of all this. I remembered how he'd once handled a neighbor who had borrowed our lawnmower and returned it broken, refusing to pay for repairs. Harold hadn't gotten angry or demanded payment. Instead, he'd simply said, "That's fine, but now I know who you are." He'd never lent the man anything again. Sometimes the most powerful lesson is simply revealing that you know who someone truly is. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying memories of Michael's childhood. His first steps taken toward me with a look of pure joy on his face. His high school graduation where he'd hugged me tightly and whispered, "We did it, Mom." His wedding where he danced with me while promising he'd always take care of me the way I'd taken care of him. When had it all changed? When had gratitude transformed into entitlement? When had I become an inconvenience rather than a mother? Morning came with no answers, only the certainty that I needed to act. I dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit I'd worn to close the sale of my company, and styled my hair carefully. Today wasn't about looking like a mother begging for scraps of affection. Today was about being recognized as a woman of substance and worth. I picked up the envelopes from my nightstand, sliding them into my handbag along with a copy of the property deed. Then I made one final call to Alina. "I'm heading over there now," I told her. "Do you want me to come with you?" Moral support, I considered the offer. "No, I need to do this alone, but thank you. Call me the minute you're done, and Maggie, remember who you are. A woman who built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. A woman who raised a child alone after losing her husband. You are not someone to be dismissed or disrespected." Her words strengthened my resolve. I know, it's time Michael remembered that too. I ended the call and headed for my car, the envelopes feeling both light as air and heavy as stone in my purse. Today, everything would change. For better or worse, my son would finally see me clearly, not as the sacrificing mother who would accept any treatment, but as a woman who knew her own worth and expected nothing less than the respect she deserved. I arrived at Michael's house just after 9 in the morning, when I knew he would be home, but before he left for his late morning meetings. This confrontation needed to happen face to face, not through a property management company or lawyer. My hands trembled slightly as I rang the doorbell, but I steadied them by recalling Michael's dismissive words about my family heirlooms. The door swung open to reveal Vanessa in her workout clothes, her expression changing from neutral to thinly veiled annoyance when she saw me. "Margaret, we weren't expecting you." "I need to speak with Michael," I said firmly. "It's important." She hesitated, clearly contemplating whether she could turn me away before reluctantly stepping aside. "He's in his office. I'll get him." I waited in their immaculate foyer, surrounded by expensive art that held no personal meaning. No family photos, no children's artwork, nothing that suggested the heart of a home rather than a showpiece for Michael's success. He appeared moments later in pressed slacks and a button-down shirt, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. "Mom. Is everything okay?" Vanessa said it was urgent. "I wouldn't say urgent," I replied evenly. "But it is necessary." He glanced at his watch, a subtle signal that my time was limited. "Well, I have a conference call in 30 minutes, so this won't take long." I opened my handbag and removed the first envelope. "I've come about the house." Michael's brow furrowed. "Our agreement was that you'd find somewhere else to stay, Mom. We've been over this. Not your living arrangements," I clarified. "This house, this property." I handed him the envelope containing the eviction notice. He took it with a puzzled expression, opening it with the casual disregard of someone who expected nothing of consequence. I watched as his eyes scanned the document, confusion giving way to disbelief and then shock. What is this? His voice had risen slightly. Some kind of joke? It's an official eviction notice. As the new owner of this property, I'm exercising my right to terminate your lease with 30 days' notice. The color drained from Michael's face. New owner, what are you talking about? I purchased the entire Oakwood Heights development last week. All 12 properties, including this one. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. That's impossible. You're broke. You came to me asking for a place to stay because you couldn't afford rent. I never said I was broke, Michael. I said my investments needed time to recover from a market downturn. That was a test when you failed spectacularly with your no rent, no stay declaration. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension in Michael's voice. What's going on? Michael turned to her, waving the notice. My mother claims she bought our house and is evicting us. Not just your house, I corrected. The entire development. Vanessa snatched the paper from Michael, her eyes widening as she read. This is ridiculous. You can't afford this neighborhood. You live in that little condo downtown. I sold my company 6 months ago, I explained, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Riverstone Consulting was acquired for a substantial sum. I never mentioned it because I wanted to see how you would treat me when you thought I had nothing to offer you financially. Michael's expression shifted from shock to indignation. So this was all some sick test? You lied to us. I simplified my situation to see if my son would show me the same compassion I've shown him his entire life. Instead, you humiliated me in front of our family and treated me like a nuisance. This is insane, Michael sputtered. You can't just buy someone's house and kick them out because your feelings got hurt. Actually, I can. It's perfectly legal. The previous owner was looking to sell, and I made an offer. The fact that you happen to be renting one of the properties is a coincidence. Or perhaps karma. Vanessa's face had turned an alarming shade of red. We have rights as tenants. We'll fight this. You certainly can try, I agreed. But as your lease specifies, the owner can terminate with 30 days' notice in the event of a sale. Section 8, paragraph 3, I checked very carefully. Michael raked his hands through his hair, his composure crumbling. You can't do this. This is our home. Actually, it's mine, I replied, echoing his words from the restaurant. Those old things are in my house now, Michael. The recognition in his eyes was immediate. His own words thrown back at him, the symmetry unmistakable. You're doing this because of the heirlooms? Mom, be reasonable. I was just trying to help you financially. By selling treasured family possessions without my permission, items I specifically asked you to safeguard for your children, Vanessa interjected, her voice tight with panic. Where are we supposed to go in 30 days? Do you know how difficult it is to find housing in this market? What about the children's school? I removed the second envelope from my purse. That brings me to this, my terms. Michael took the envelope cautiously as if it might burn him. He read the letter slowly, his expression shifting through a kaleidoscope of emotions, anger, confusion, shame, and finally a glimmer of understanding. You're giving me a choice, he said quietly. Yes, you can leave as the notice requires, or we can negotiate new terms. What kind of terms? The wariness in his voice suggested he expected something unreasonable. Weekly family dinners at my condo. Real time with my grandchildren, not supervised visits where I'm treated like a stranger. And most importantly, respect. The kind of respect you'd show anyone who deserves basic human dignity. Michael's jaw tightened. And if I agree to these terms, we can stay. With a proper lease agreement and market rate rent, yes. This is emotional blackmail, Vanessa hissed. I turned to her calmly. No, this is a boundary, something I should have established long ago. Looking back at Michael, I continued, I raised you to be a man of compassion and integrity. A man who honors family bonds and recognizes the sacrifices others have made for him. Somewhere along the way, you lost sight of those values. Michael's expression hardened. So this is about making me feel guilty for not letting you move in? This is about consequences, Michael. For years, I've accepted your gradually increasing disrespect and dismissal. I've made excuses for your behavior. I've prioritized maintaining peace over maintaining my dignity. That ends today. You can't just buy your way into our lives, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. I'm not buying anything. I'm reclaiming what should have been freely given basic respect from my son. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of decades of relationship shifts hanging between us. Finally, Michael's shoulders slumped slightly. I need time to process this, he said. You have 30 days, I replied, turning toward the door. Oh, and I'll be sending movers tomorrow to collect the family heirlooms. Please have them ready. Mom, Michael called as I reached for the doorknob. I paused but didn't turn around. Did you really buy 12 houses just to teach me a lesson? I looked back at him over my shoulder. No, Michael, I bought 12 houses because it was a sound investment. Teaching you a lesson is just a bonus. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The confrontation had been painful but necessary. For too long, I had allowed Michael to dictate the terms of our relationship, accepting scraps of his attention while ignoring his growing disregard. Whether he chose to leave or stay under my new terms, something fundamental had changed today. I had reclaimed my power. I had reminded my son and myself of who I truly was, not just a mother who had sacrificed everything, but a woman of substance who deserved respect. The future of our relationship rested in Michael's hands now. But whatever he decided, I would never again allow myself to be treated as less than I was worth. I expected immediate pushback from Michael, perhaps even legal threats. Instead, 3 days of silence followed our confrontation. The professional movers I sent to collect the family heirlooms reported that Michael had been civil if cold, and that everything appeared intact and carefully packed. On the 4th day, my phone rang with Michael's number. I answered with a steady hello, unsure what to expect. We need to talk, he said, his voice lacking its usual confident edge. Can I come by your place tomorrow evening? Of course, I replied, trying to keep surprise from my voice. The next evening, I prepared a simple dinner, not as a peace offering but as a neutral backdrop for what would likely be a difficult conversation. At precisely 6, my doorbell rang. Michael stood there looking uncharacteristically disheveled. His normally perfect hair was uncombed, and his eyes bore the shadowed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. Come in, I said, stepping aside. He entered cautiously, glancing around my condo as if seeing it for the first time. His eyes lingered on the family heirlooms I had already unpacked and displayed, the silver tea service on my sideboard, my grandfather's pocket watches in their display case, photo albums arranged neatly on the bookshelf. Would you like something to drink? I offered. Just water, thanks. We sat at my small dining table, an awkward silence stretching between us. Finally, Michael spoke. Vanessa wants us to fight the eviction, he began. She's already contacted a lawyer. I nodded, having expected as much. That's her right. I told her no. That surprised me. Why? Michael stared into his water glass. Because after you left, I did something I hadn't done in years. I really thought about our relationship, about how things used to be compared to how they are now. He looked up at me, his expression troubled. I found old photos from when Dad died. Do you remember how I wouldn't leave your side for months? How I insisted on sleeping in your bed because I was afraid you'd disappear too? Of course I remember, I said softly. Those difficult months after Harold's death had forged an intense bond between us, mother and son against the world. You never once complained, he continued. You held me through nightmares, you listened to me talk about Dad for hours, you rearranged your entire life to make sure I felt secure. He paused, and somewhere along the way I forgot all that. I watched my son carefully, not interrupting his rare moment of reflection. The thing is, Mom, I don't even know when it started to change. When I began seeing you as an obligation rather than as the person who gave me everything. He ran a hand through his hair. Maybe it was college, when I started meeting people from wealthy families who had never known struggle. Or maybe it was my first big bonus at work, when suddenly I was making more in a year than you ever had. Success can change perspective, I acknowledged. That's a kind way of putting it, Michael said with a humorless laugh. I became insufferable, didn't I? I couldn't deny it. You changed, yes. Vanessa doesn't understand why I won't fight the eviction. She keeps talking about the children's schools and her social connections in the neighborhood. Michael sighed. But all I can think about is how you must have felt when I rejected you in front of everyone. How I've been treating you for years now." His candor caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, perhaps even hostility, not this introspection. "I'm not saying we won't move," he clarified. "I just don't think fighting you is the right answer, not after everything." I studied my son's face, seeing glimpses of both the boy he had been and the man I had hoped he would become. "What do you want, Michael?" He seemed surprised by the directness of my question. "I want a chance to make things right. Not just because you now own my house, but because you deserve better than the son I've been." I nodded slowly, cautiously hopeful but still protective of my newly reclaimed boundaries. "And what would that look like to you?" "I don't know exactly," he admitted. "But maybe we could start with those weekly family dinners you mentioned. And I could bring Emma and Taylor to visit more often without Vanessa micromanaging everything." "And the rent?" I asked, needing to establish that all my terms were acknowledged. "We'll pay market rate, of course, it's only fair." He hesitated. Though Vanessa isn't happy about that either. I couldn't help but smile slightly. "I never expected she would be." Michael looked at me earnestly. "I know one conversation doesn't fix years of behavior, Mom. I know I have a lot to prove. But I'd like the chance to try if you're willing to give it to me." I considered his words carefully. This wasn't the first time Michael had shown remorse after poor behavior, but there was something different in his demeanor now, a humility I hadn't seen since he was very young. "I'm willing," I said finally. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about what we model for Emma and Taylor. What kind of values they learn from watching how our family functions." Michael nodded soberly. "I know, I've been thinking about that too. What am I teaching them when they see how I treat you? What message does that send about respecting family, about gratitude?" Exactly. Children learn from what they observe, not just what we tell them. A year later, I stood in the community room of Golden Horizons, the senior housing complex I'd established using several of the properties from Oakwood Heights. What had once been luxury single-family homes had been thoughtfully converted into affordable apartments for seniors, with community spaces and gardens. Michael stood beside me, helping a resident with her wheelchair while Emma and Taylor distributed cookies they had baked with me the day before. Vanessa was noticeably absent, having divorced Michael 6 months earlier, when it became clear his values were fundamentally shifting away from the materialistic lifestyle she preferred. The transition hadn't been easy. Michael had initially moved into a modest apartment closer to my condo, allowing him to honor our weekly dinner arrangement and giving the children more time with me. Vanessa had fought the changes every step of the way until finally declaring she hadn't signed up for this new Michael and filing for divorce. To everyone's surprise, including my own, Michael had seemed relieved rather than devastated. "I was becoming someone I didn't like," he told me one evening after the children were asleep. "Someone Dad would have been ashamed of." Now, watching him patiently listen to an elderly veteran's stories, I saw glimpses of the compassionate boy I had raised, the one who had somehow gotten lost in adult Michael's pursuit of status and wealth. "Grandma, Mr. Jenkins wants to know if you'll play chess with him again today," Taylor announced, tugging at my sleeve. "Tell him I'd be delighted," I replied, smiling at my granddaughter. These days, I spent more time with Emma and Taylor than I ever had before, helping with homework, teaching them to cook, and sharing family stories illustrated by the heirlooms that now decorated my home. Later that evening, as Michael and I cleaned up after dinner at my condo, he paused, dish towel in hand. "You know, I've been thinking about something you said when all this first happened," he said. "About how you bought those houses because it was a sound investment, and teaching me a lesson was just a bonus." I smiled. "I remember. It was the best lesson anyone's ever taught me," he said quietly, "even if I didn't appreciate it at the time." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "The best lessons rarely come easily, Michael." He nodded, looking around at my modest but comfortable home. "I spent so many years chasing bigger houses, fancier cars, trying to impress people I didn't even like. all while taking for granted the one person who never needed to be impressed, who loved me regardless. That's what mothers do, I said simply. Not all mothers, Michael countered. Not like you did. He hung the dish towel carefully on its hook. I'm trying to teach Emma and Taylor that a home isn't about the size of the house or how expensive the furniture is. It's about the people inside it. As we moved to the living room where the children were setting up a board game, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Michael still had his moments of reverting to old patterns, and our relationship continued to require work from both of us. But the fundamental shift was real. The house had never been the important thing to own. It was always about what makes a home: respect, gratitude, and love freely given rather than extracted through manipulation or power. In reclaiming my dignity, I had ultimately helped my son reclaim his humanity, and that was worth more than all the property in the world.